Hi friends, Toony here again from Potential Synergy. It is summertime and I am so tired. But other than that, I'm really glad I get to be back and filming again. It's been a long while. In this video, we are sewing this pouch. This is the Nasyow Pouch. I'm not sure how to pronounce the word. I looked it up, I couldn't find how to pronounce it, but anyway, this pattern comes to you from Country Cow Designs. And I would like to thank the pattern maker for allowing me to film this so long. The reason I wanted to film so long for this one is because my version is a little bit different from the original pattern. So in the original pattern, you have the pouch itself, and then inside the pouch, there's a little zipper pocket. Mine doesn't have that. So it's super simple. I think you need 3 pattern pieces. And there are certain things in the process of making the pouch that are a little bit different. Nothing much. I'm not gonna go through like the notions and the fabrics and things like that. You can read those details in the pattern instructions. This is a free pattern. I think it's an awesome pattern. I know that technically you can make a pouch without a pattern, but I feel like having this pattern really helps shape the pouch. Like I really like the shape of this pouch, so I just, and if you've never used a pattern before, this is a great pattern to try. I can't wait for y'all to make this pouch, and let's get sewing. Here are the pattern pieces that you're going to need. First, piece A is your exterior panel. You need to cut 2 pieces for the front and the back. And I have embroidered on one of my exterior panels. The pattern piece has a placement guide for it. And the design can be 4.5 inches tall by 5.5 inches wide. For my exterior fabric, I'm using cotton canvas and I interfaced it with fusible fleece. I used the exterior panel to cut my fusible fleece, but I trimmed the seam allowance for the fusible fleece to reduce bulk. So I cut the fusible fleece 3/8 of an inch smaller on each side. Next, we're going to move on to piece B, which is our zip tab. The pattern instructs you to cut 2 pieces of piece B, but I only cut 1, and I'll tell you what I'll do with the other side of the zip when we get to that step. The other pattern piece that you're going to need for this version is piece C, which is your lining panel. You're going to need 2. I'm using twill fabric for the lining, so I'm not interfacing my lining pieces with woven interfacing. If you're using quilted cotton or more lightweight fabric, please interface it with SF101 or an equivalent. You're also going to need a zipper or a zip. Because I'm attaching the zipper to the pouch a little bit differently than what the pattern suggests, my zipper is a little bit longer. I think this is 12 inches long. I am using a number 3 zipper for this pouch, but I have used a number 5 zipper before and it worked just fine. First of all, let's prepare the zipper. If your zipper has a metal stop like mine does, go ahead and trim it so that there's no chance of your needle hitting that metal. Next, I'm going to grab my zipper tab. As I told you, I only made 1. I'm going to go ahead and fold it in half, and I'm also going to mark it just to be precise. So it's 1.5 inches in all directions. So I'm just going to mark 3/4 of an inch and draw a line there. And I'm going to go to my iron and press each side to the line that I just marked, and then press again so it folds like that. After pressing your zipper tab, 2 of the raw edges should be hidden in the middle like that. Now you're going to cover the side of the zipper where the metal stop was with the zipper tab, and you're going to go to your sewing machine and top stitch with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm at my sewing machine, and now I'm going to stitch the zipper tab onto the zipper tape using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, so 1/8 of an inch from the folded edge. Before we move on, please make sure that the stitches catch both sides of the zipper tab, just like that. And then go ahead and trim the tab to the same width as the zipper tape. Now I'm going to mark where I want to put my zipper tape. I'm going to mark 5/8 of an inch in at the top of each exterior panel, and I'm marking on both sides. Here's my exterior front panel, and as you can see, I marked 5/8 of an inch from each side at the top where I'm going to place my zipper tape. Now I'm going to place my zipper tape onto the front panel, right sides together. And I want my zipper tab to be on the right. And I'm going to use my wonder clips to keep them together. I'm also going to go ahead and mark my zipper tape 5/8 of an inch from the left edge. So I'm going to transfer that mark that I put on the front panel, and I'm going to mark on the zipper tape at the same spot. Just like that. Next, you're going to unzip your zipper, maybe halfway, like that. And then you're going to make a fold where you just marked, and you're going to do it at just for the top of the zipper tape, like I'm doing on the screen. I'm showing you again for a clarification. I'm using my left hand to hold the zipper tape in place, and with my right hand, I hold the tail and then turn it to the right 90 degrees. So it creates a little 45-degree fold, as you can see on the screen there. Now I'm going to go to my sewing machine and baste the zipper tape to the front panel. I'm using my standard presser foot for this step, but ideally you want to use a zipper foot because it's easier to get in there. And the tail doesn't like to stay in place, so you might have to help it a little bit. Some people like to hand baste it, which is great. I don't have that kind of patience. But however you want to do it, you can use a stiletto, you can use a hemostat to keep that tail in place. Whatever you do, just be careful. I'm basting my zipper tape to my front panel using an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that I have basted the zipper tape to the front panel, I'm going to grab one of my lining pieces and I'm going to put it right sides together with the front panel. I marked the wrong side of the lining panel for you, and I unzipped the zipper to get the zipper pull out of the way. I also marked the midpoint of each panel just to use as a reference guide. And now I'm going to clip the lining piece to the front panel. Now I'm going to go to my sewing machine and stitch the front panel and the lining piece together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I just want to point out that I am using my normal straight stitch foot, but you should use a zipper foot for this one, just to make sure that you can get really close to the zipper tape. And you can open the zipper to make room, not make it bumpy, and go ahead and stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Don't forget to backstitch at the beginning and at the end. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and press the exterior fabric away from the zipper tape so the seams are behind it, but the lining is away from it. And then I'm going to top stitch only the exterior using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Just to show you again, I'm only top stitching the exterior to the seam allowance. You see the seam allowance is pressed to the side of the exterior, and we're not top stitching the lining at all. Only the seam allowance and the exterior. And I'm just going to clip my zipper tail right there, and I'm going to top stitch the exterior to the seam allowance with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Alright, and just to show you, here's how it looks on the exterior side, and then this is how it looks on the back. And as you can see, I did not top stitch the lining at all. Now grab your other exterior panel. Mine has my little tag on it, and again I marked 5/8 of an inch from each side at the top, and now we're going to place the front panel with the zipper tape on the back panel, and we're going to line the zipper tape up with the marks just like that. And now I'm going to pin or clip the zipper tape to the back panel, and then I'm going to go to my sewing machine and baste it with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once you get to the tail of the zipper tape, once again, you're going to mark it 5/8 of an inch from the side, and then you're going to fold it 90 degrees and then pin it or put a clip on it to keep it in place. Now we're going to go baste the zipper tape to the exterior back panel. Alrighty, now I'm going to grab my other lining piece, and then I'm going to put it right sides together with the main panel that we have assembled. And I marked the wrong side for your reference again, so right sides together, and we're going to line it up with the zipper tape just like we did before with the other one. Then I'm going to clip them together and go to my sewing machine and stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once again, I'm going to press the exterior fabric away from the zipper tape so that the seams are behind the exterior fabric, but then the lining is away from it. And then I'm going to go to my sewing machine and top stitch only the exterior using 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. For final assembly, you're going to open the zip halfway. Then you're going to clip the 2 exterior panels right sides together on all 3 sides. We want to make sure that the zipper tab is pointing toward the lining side. We're also going to clip the lining panels right sides together as well, but we're going to leave a gap to turn the back right side out at the end. You can leave a gap on one of the sides or at the bottom of the bag. For this time, I'm going to leave a gap at the bottom of the bag, and I'm just measuring my hand so that I know that I have enough space to turn the bag right side out. And I marked where I would need to stop stitching on the fabric. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew the exterior and lining panels on the sides and the bottoms, except for the gap that I left, with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm using my zipper foot finally for this step because I'm going to be sewing next to the zipper tab and there's not a lot of room, so using a zipper foot will really help me get really close to the zipper tab without sewing over it. I'm going to start at the bottom of my lining panel. And once again, I'm using 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm sewing over a hump over here, and I'm using my hump jumper because sometimes when you're sewing over a hump, your sewing machine might struggle and you get skip stitches and nasty stitches. So using a hump jumper or a compensating tool of some sort will help the machine feed the fabric more evenly. Alright, so that's my first side. You can see it's not entirely perfect. We're going to come back to it in a minute. For now, I'm going to continue finishing the other sides of the pouch. Alright, and don't forget to leave a gap for turning your bag right side out at the end. At this step, I have sewn all the sides of my pouch and I left a gap. Just to make sure that my stitches are neat and straight, I'm going to go ahead and do another row of stitching right next to the row of stitching that I did before, especially on the exterior fabric and the part where the zipper is. And I'm just sewing another row of stitching right within that seam allowance. We are almost finished with our zipper pouch. Next, you're going to sew across the corners with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So what I do is I just grab my two lining pieces, pull them away like that, and then pinch so that the seam allowances are lined up. And I'm going to point one seam allowance one direction and then the other to the opposite direction, just like that. And then clip it in place. And then repeat with the other 3 corners. And here I'm making sure that my seam allowance on the bottom seam of the lining points in the same direction on both corners. For the exterior, I want to point my seam allowance in the opposite direction from the lining. So if the seam allowance on the lining is clipped to the left side, I will clip my seam allowance on the exterior to the right side, just to reduce bulk. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew the corners with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. One tip that is mentioned in the pattern instructions is to sew a second row of stitching directly behind the first to straighten the seams, especially on the exterior side, and I'm going to follow this tip. We are almost done. The last step is we're going to turn the pouch right side out through the gap that we left earlier, and I like to just push the 2 corners of the lining out first and just kind of push from the inside out gently. Be careful not to rip your stitches. It can happen, so just take your time. And I want to check my corners if the seam allowances align, and that one looks pretty good. If for some reason you're not happy with how your corners look, you can turn your pouch wrong side out again and unpick your stitches and fix them. Everything looks good. Now I'm gonna go ahead and sew that opening shut. I went to my iron off camera and just kind of press that area so it's flat and easier to sew. I'm also going to mark the beginning and end of my stitch line. I like to do that for good practice. And I try to get really close to the edge as possible, so I use a very small seam allowance. I typically use 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to trim my thread, and once everything looks good, I'm going to tuck my lining inside my pouch. And voila! The pouch is complete. Let's do a little quality check. Okay, so the zipper closes just fine. Love it. Everything looks nice and neat. I try to sew close to the zipper tab but not over it, so there should be a little gap between the zipper tab and the pouch, and the zipper tails are neatly tucked inside the seams. Good job! That's it for the pouch from Country Cow Designs. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you learned something and I hope you enjoyed the process. See you in the next one. Bye!